RedChip. We build investor audiences for small cap companies, retail and institutional. 33 years, thousands of clients. We are experts in messaging. National TV ad campaigns, investor webinars, digital media, reaching hundreds of thousands of investors. RedChip. We do it well, we do it right, we do it big. RedChip. Call us or email us today.
In progress.
Hello, this is Craig Brailsford with RedChip Companies. Thank you for joining today's event with ASP Isotopes, which trades on the Nasdaq under the ticker ASPI. Joining us today is Executive Chairman Paul Mann. In a moment, Paul will begin to answer your questions. Welcome to everyone joining us today on X, YouTube, LinkedIn, and other social media platforms. To submit your question, we invite you to join us on Zoom. Use the link provided. Once in Zoom, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your window and type your question into the text box. Before we begin, please allow me to read the Safe Harbor Statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management, constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical facts should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. Paul, we already have several questions submitted, but if you would like to make any opening remarks before we dive into the questions, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Craig, for the intro, and thanks everyone for your interest. So just on forward-looking statements, please refer to this interview and presentation may involve some forward-looking statements. So please review our SEC filings on our website to review a list of disclaimers, risk factors, and other information about the company. But now, Craig, I mean, this is your time for Q&A. You know what we do. We've done the presentation so many times before, so let's go straight to Q&A. I think that's best.
Correct. Thank you very much, Paul. Number one is, how is your health, Paul? Do you still expect to return as CEO on the 19th?
Thanks for that. I suppose that's the first question. Thanks for that, Craig. So, I'm feeling really good. I had some very major surgery done in September. I had to learn to walk again, come out of a wheelchair and crutches. But now I'm feeling great. I've got on the plane back down to South Africa again now, feeling excited, ready to go. So, I mean, Monday is the 19th, and that's the day I'm resuming as CEO. But I haven't really left that much. I mean, listen, I spent a lot of time in rehab over the last 3 months, and a lot of time in oxygen chambers and that kind of stuff. But I've still been working, keeping up what's going on, been very busy, but I haven't been down here on the ground with the troops, with the workers, seeing what's going on. But I'm looking forward to getting back into it again on Monday. So definitely, very much so. Good, feeling good.
Thanks, Paul. Can you provide an update on the Silicon 28 plant? What is the reason for the delay, and when do you expect to make the first shipment?
Yeah, so we shipped samples of Silicon 28, I think that's during August, end of August last year, and they went to the customer, and the main goal there was to check that the enrichment curves were enriching at the right rate to make sure our analytics and their analytics were aligned. Not many places in the world can measure Silicon 28 isotopic purity at sort of 0.005% enrichment. It's a challenging thing to do. So we had to check our labs were working, and the enrichment was going as per the computer model suggested. So that took place during I guess over September, that kind of time frame, October. 2 of the customers came out to visit our plants. They had a look around, and then they basically suggested a couple of changes to the plant, and so we've implemented those changes. Right now, I think they're just waiting to change a couple of O-rings on certain compressors, and then they should be able to restart the plant to get going again. What we did learn from our customers was that the enrichment was going exactly as expected it to. Our measurements were accurate. We're measuring it as we thought we would, to the correct accuracy. Measuring impurities to parts per trillion and isotopic purity to parts per million or billion is exceptionally challenging. There are probably only 2 labs in the world that can do it, and we've got one, and our customer has the other. And so it's important to make sure that everything was aligned, and it is. So assuming they start up during January, in the next sort of couple of weeks, should make the first shipment towards the end of the first quarter, is my guess. So fingers crossed, let's see how that goes. But yeah, we're excited about that, and so is the customer.
Congratulations on closing the Renergen acquisition. How should we think about Renergen and its earning power in near term and further on in the future?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So yeah, we just got Renergen done in time. There's a slight delay at some of the government departments getting it through the required government regulatory processes and that kind of stuff. We got it done. We closed it, I think, last week or earlier this week. So that's been done now, which is great. And Renergen's a fantastic asset. It's a very unique asset. It's actually easy to model as well. And we haven't given any guidance, but I think if you look at the Renergen website and their previous presentations to investors, they give you some guidance on phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 is the initial stage of the project, where we basically build a proof of concept plant, and then we start selling product from that proof of concept plant, and that will allow us to build phase 2. And phase 2 has a support of about $500 million of funding from the US government. So phase 1 will produce 2 products, natural gas and helium. We always produce natural gas and helium. You can't produce one without the other. And so the natural gas side will produce about 2,500 gigajoules a day when phase 1 is complete. That's Renergen's guidance. And I know most people here probably from the US, so used to MMBTUs. I certainly am. 1 gigajoule is equal to 1 MMBTU to about the 4th of a decimal. So think about it being the same number. And in terms of pricing natural gas, South Africa has a huge energy shortage. And so we'll likely price that gas in the trucking market. I call it $18 to $22 per gigajoule. If you convert to power, it's more like 9 to 12. And then industrials are a little bit lower, actually. So perhaps the blended price is, I don't know, call it $13 per gigajoule, that kind of number. We'll see when we get there, but they're the 3 main markets. And so 2,500 gigajoules a day, that kind of price is kind of $12 million a year, that kind of number. And the helium market, which I'm more excited about, should produce from phase 1 about 58 to 60 MCF a day, million cubic feet. And the price for helium is much harder to predict. So it's traded as low as $280 per MCF. It's also reached $3,500 per MCF. So very variable. I would guess our blended contracted price, call it maybe $380, that kind of thing. So that brings in probably $8 million a year, that kind of thing. So when you think about that, add together nat gas, helium from phase 1, it's probably a $20 million revenue kind of item, that kind of thing. And gross margin, that's quite low. It's probably a 20 to 30% gross margin, that kind of thing. That's what Renergen have said in the past. In terms of phase 2, that gets a lot bigger. And so, phase 2 should come on stream in the early 2030s. And, phase 2 for natural gas is more like sort of 34,000 gigajoules a day. And perhaps we have a higher mix towards the trucking. So maybe we get $14 per gigajoule. Again, I haven't got a crystal ball. Don't know that for certain. So that's more like $170 to $180 million a year. And then the helium side of phase 2 is sort of 890 to 900 MCF a day. And so, assuming the same price, 380, that brings in maybe $120 to $130 million a year. So you combine those 2 together, that's called a $300 million revenue plant, likely a kind of a 80% gross margin, what Renergen have said. So $240 million of kind of gross margin a year. There's not much cost between margin and EBITDA, actually. So that's quite exciting. So listen, we're working hard on getting phase 1 finished. The team's been working really hard over the last 6 months. Our engineers will be down there a lot, helping, working out what how to accelerate things. And we've hired some really experienced drillers to try and improve the drilling flow rates and that kind of stuff. And we'll get a full update on Venergen in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. And there's also a lot of other stuff we can do with Venergen too, I'd add. This phase 2 still uses up only a fraction of the acreage that we have. And to perspective, there's a pipeline that comes from Mozambique into Central South Africa that takes 200 petajoules a day from Mozambique to middle of Johannesburg, and that pipeline stops running in the next few years. Sasol said there's no longer any gas to go through that pipeline, and our phase 2 makes about 11 petajoules. So it's 5% of what is the demand is going to be lost over the next few years. So potentially other stuff we can do with that acreage. We'll work out as we go through the next few years how we can maximize the returns on that facility.
Why hasn't Ytterbium 176 shipped yet, and when is it expected to ship?
Yes, there's obviously been a delay in Ytterbium. So a couple of simple things actually happened. I think it was during October, a laser broke. And clearly when we built this plant, when there wasn't, we built it very quickly on a very good budget, but clearly there wasn't enough redundancy built into the plant. And so a laser broke, had to get shipped back to the manufacturer. Then it had to get repaired, get sent back to us. It's arrived back now, and so they've started putting it back into the plant again and getting the plant going again. Lesson learned from this: I've ordered an extra laser, so we've got some redundancy in case this happens again. The other lesson learned is that this plant is in an area where there's normally no load shedding. So load shedding happens in South Africa, where they basically curtail power for certain periods of the day, and so basically the lights just turn out. This plant is in an area where there is no load shedding, and so we never expected to have a power shutdown or a cut. Most of our plants actually are facilitated and prepared for load shedding. They have a large generator and a UPS, an uninterrupted power supply at the plant. So if you go to our silicon plant, they've got a huge set of batteries that give you 3 minutes of power during a load shedding moment, or the first 3 minutes of a load shedding moment, and that allows us to fire up the diesel generators that will then power the plant through the load shedding moment. So this plant doesn't have that facility, or didn't have that facility in place. During October, there was a large power shutdown to the whole of Pretoria. Some power station or some transformer suddenly stopped working, and for the whole of eastern Pretoria, the power went down for a day or two. And during that power shutdown, the laser was damaged. We've sent the laser back to get it repaired. It's come back. We've also installed now a UPS and a generator at this site, just in case it ever happens again. And so we feel confident we're back on track again. Second part of your question is, when do you expect to ship? So we hope to get our the plant back up and running again, and the continuous processing vessel in the plant by early Q2, and then ship shortly after that. They've been enriching really well to date. They're going to mid 70 to 80% in the first enrichment stage, which is great. And the plan is to go to 99.5% after that. So yeah, we're fingers crossed. They've shipped their first sample to the customer. That's being tested at the moment, and we'll get results as and when, and we're hopefully ready to go second quarter.
Thanks, Paul. Is the QLE spinoff still anticipated for the first quarter of 2026? How should we think about valuation?
Okay, so we've just filed our S1 with the SEC. So I've got to be a little bit careful what I say here to avoid gun jumping and all the other rules that are around an IPO or what have you. So, what we'll say is we filed our S1 confidentially during the fourth quarter of 2025. I think it was late November, and we announced that via the press release and via an 8K. Now, normally there's a 30-day turnaround for your first submission of an S1, but there are significant delays at the SEC right now, given the government shutdown that took place through most of the first half of the fourth quarter. So it's likely going to take a little bit longer than 30 days. And so we're expecting to hear back from the SEC, anytime soon regarding the first submission. That's a confidential submission, that was. Each subsequent filing typically has a sort of 5-day turnaround from the SEC for additional comments. But again, perhaps in this environment, it's a prolonged turnaround. We'll have to wait and see. So that kind of gives you an idea of the cadence of flow of getting things through the regulators. For our ASPI IPO, we just had 2 sets of comments from the SEC, so it's fairly straightforward. It's fairly quick. Now, I wouldn't expect anything different here. Obviously, it's out of our control. It's actually more of a straightforward S1 than what our ASPI S1 was. So the goal of the spin is to do this as soon as possible. As you can see, a lot of the timing is out of our control. I'd like to think we'll get done during the first quarter, but I can't guarantee that. But it's as soon as possible is the plan. I would add that our financials go stale on either February 14th or 15th. I can't remember if it's in the leap year or not, but it's around that time. And so there's some urgency to get this done. But hopefully that gives you some perspective on our thinking of timing. The goal is to do this as soon as possible. I think it would have happened in the second half of last year if this hadn't shut down, but it did, and so it is what it is.
Based on the assumptions you've just provided, it looks as if you paid less than half times 2030 EBITDA for Renergen. Is my math correct?
So you've done the math, not me. But as you could see from what I just said, if current prices stay the same and things happen as we are, it's potentially a $300 million business. It's maybe $240 million in gross profit, and so your math therefore is, would suggest it's probably okay. Look, I spent most of my career trying to find really high quality assets trading at distressed valuations. Some investors go and buy things like Pfizer, J&J, Procter and Gamble. I tend to try and look for things that have some multiples of upside rather than percentage of upside. And so, listen, we found a great asset, a great management team, just mispriced, and we feel happy with what we've done. We're going to bring a lot of value to the shareholders of Renergen and to that asset. When you combine the 2 companies together, the common skill set is huge. The synergies are huge, and I think the Renergen team are going to bring a huge amount of value to the ASPI team as well. Steph's going to make a fantastic CEO of electronics. He knows that market better than anyone else inside ASPI, and so it's a great synergy. But yeah, I mean, listen, it was an attractive acquisition, I think, to both parties.
Paul, what are your goals for 2026?
So the main goal is to get 3 plants up and running and start producing product and generating revenues. There's no doubt about that. I guess the second phase, or equally important, is to finish phase 1C at Renergen and get Renergen producing free cash flow as well. And then obviously the goal, we need to spin out QLE, and the goal is to do that as soon as possible. And then I guess finally, I'd like to expand Pet Labs as well quite a lot. I mean, Pet Labs is a great business, and huge potential growth runway ahead of it over the next several years. And so it'd be nice to try and really to really grow that as well.
Can you explain the purpose of Skyline Builders? It doesn't appear core to your business. Why did you make an investment in it?
So Skyline Builders is an opportunity we saw to make acquisitions in the critical materials space. It doesn't necessarily use our balance sheet. And, I think critical material supply chains started to become challenged, I think, during 2018, and they got progressively worse and worse since. And now we're at a point where, there are a lot of materials the US require, and we require, that have very few suppliers in the world, and there's no certainty you can get supply of those materials or feedstocks for us. And so the goal here is to make it so that we can go out and find attractive feedstocks and materials the US need, the US and we need, either for security or for just to make sure we can operate. And so if you look at the first acquisitions we've made or we've announced or trying to announce or trying to do, we've announced a very large acquisition of a large Asian mining company, and we'll hope to announce soon exactly what it is, that we think is critical to the United States security and likely has substantial amounts of feedstock that we can use at ASPI in some of our, or QLE in some of our businesses. And I hope to announce soon exactly what that business is, but we expect it to be extremely, I think the return on investment on that asset is going to be huge. And the second asset we've announced we're hoping to acquire, we've signed a non-binding term sheet, is for supercritical, which is a business that that can extract uranium from seawater using essentially a resin or reverse osmosis type process. And that business benefits from substantial amounts of funding from the DOE over the last several years, and it has an exclusive license to it. And again, we think this is quicker and cheaper than building a mine, which we think is important. So the ROI is going to be substantially better than building a mine, we believe. And so when you look at those two, I would say they're not core to our business. They're certainly supportive to our business and will help us grow our business and arguably make our business safer in terms of guaranteeing us the feedstocks we need to operate our business in case we see these critical material supply chains get more and more challenging. And the third part of your question, I think, was about why I made an investment in it, and that I think I've summarized that already. I mean, basically, it's because this is I think it's a great investment. We're going to make a huge return on it, but also, I personally invested in it as well. But I think it's going to be really secure our feedstocks and supply chains, and it's going to benefit the US at whole at large as well. In that, we're going to help supply the US with a lot of the critical materials it needs to make sure the industries the US has operates correctly.
Another Renergen question for you, Paul. When do you expect to start phase 2?
So we need to finish phase 1 first. So I think we've said that we expect to finish phase 1 around the middle of the year, middle of 2026. We're probably tracking a little bit ahead of that right now, but things can change. It's about drilling wells, and it's been a wet season, so things can go slow or faster. But we said around the middle of the year. So that means during the second half of this year, we'll start on phase 2, hopefully. And to start on phase 2, just to remind you what phase 2 looks like. We need to contribute $170 million of capital of equity to phase 2, and that will allow us to draw down a $500 million loan from the DFC, Development Finance Corporation, and from a large bank. So $750 million of debt financing and $170 million of equity financing from ourselves to start the project off and get the project properly going.
Can you provide an update on carbon 12 and carbon 14?
Yes. So we shipped our carbon 12 samples in December. There's small quantities, but we shipped. I believe the feedback was that they looked good. They came back fine. And but where the real money is made in this plant is carbon 14. Carbon 12 could be much larger longer term, and we might need a larger plant to produce that if the demand for carbon 12 grows as we hope it will. That depends a lot on factors outside of our control. We expect to get the carbon 14 feedstock in January. We spoke to our Canadian counterparties in late December, and things were on track for that. It's been obviously a very painful 18-month delay where they really have fumbled the ball pretty badly, but they're going now. They've worked through the problems they had. We've helped them do that quite a lot. And so hopefully that feedstock arrives in January, and that allows us to start processing it. We're taking this chance right now, actually, between carbon 12 and 14 to change a compressor in the plant to make it a more efficient plant for processing carbon 14. And so that change of compressor will take another sort of 5 or 6 days and should be ready in time for the carbon 14 that should arrive towards the end of January. And then assuming that that happens, we'd like to ship carbon 14 I guess early Q2. Let's see that. Yeah, early Q2, maybe middle of Q2.
Financial question, Paul. How much cash do you currently have on the balance sheet? What are your cash needs for the next 12 months? And do you expect to raise any more equity in the near term?
Right. So on September 30th, 2025, we had $113 million of cash on our balance sheet. We then raised another $200 million in very early October, I think the first or second day of October, and that's at the ASPI level. So that gives you a pro forma. We'll obviously announce our December 31 results end of March. So I'm giving you right now the published numbers. So that gives us a pro forma kind of number of sort of $313 million minus what we've spent between September 30th and today. For QLE, we raised $70 million in November of 2025. Now, QLE had about $20 million prior to the raise. And of that 70, 30 million came from ASPI. So if you add all that up on a pro forma basis for September 30th, plus what's been raised since, ASPI should have about $270 million, and QLE should have about $90 million, both, and then minus the spend from September to today. And therefore, on a consolidated kind of pro forma basis, as of September 2025, that comes out at about $360 million. So we've never had as much cash on our balance sheet as we have today. Second part was cash needs for the next 12 months. So, we spent most of them. So I'm going to talk about ASPI cash needs here rather than QLE cash needs. We'll let QLE management do that as and when they do their IPO presentations and spin-off presentations and that kind of stuff. So from an ASPI side, of the 270 that we have, we don't spend a lot. We don't spend a huge amount of money on OPEX. Maybe it's $5 to $10 million a quarter, that kind of number. Big quarters 10, small quarters kind of 5. And then we have to spend $170 million on Renogen. There's not much capex left on the 3 plants that we're in the process of producing from. Capex has been spent there over the last 3 years. And obviously, we'd like to build some more plants. So, we'd like to build a few more laser plants. And so I think I've said in the past, laser plants are kind of $5 million a go, that kind of number. And obviously, we've said that we'd like to build a plant for nickel 64, gadolinium 160, another ytterbium plant. There's a few other interesting medical isotopes that coming through as well. And the semiconductor side, we think silver looks interesting. And so we're kind of like those laser plants. They're kind of $5 million each. They're not large pieces of capex. And obviously, we'd like to build a larger ASP plant somewhere. They're near a $30 million capex item. However, we can use a lot of leverage in an ASP plant. We can't use leverage in a quantum plant. There's not a lot of capex in a quantum plant or capital equipment in a quantum plant that you can use as collateral for a loan. Whereas in an ASP plant, all the compressors can be collateral for a loan, a lot of the computer systems, the control systems, the valves. And so of the $30 million in an ASP plant, it's kind of likely we can put, maybe 20 of that in a loan and $10 of equity, that kind of number. So that's kind of our cash needs. And then the final bit, I think, was raising in equity in the near future. Listen, we've got more cash than we've ever had before. We should start generating free cash flow quite soon. I don't see any need for additional equity in the short term. I'd like to think actually our next raise is debt, and it's probably not even this year, it's next, but we'll wait and see. I hope that answered the question.
Should we expect you to start construction on a plant in Iceland during 2026?
So in Iceland, we are close to getting the final permit. The Icelandic government, South African government, are talking amongst themselves to try and make sure the technology is transferred effectively. And Iceland has never built a nuclear plant before or an isotope enrichment plant before, so this is new. This is new territory for them, and so they're having to work out how to fit this in with the regulators. I think they've done that. I think they're pretty close to doing that. I would suggest we haven't been pushing this part of our business too aggressively. Quite frankly, our engineers are so focused on getting the current plants up and running. Trying to build new plants in Iceland is a distraction for them. And also, we'd like to sign a contract with a large customer before we start building that plant. And I also, the next plants we build, that we're prioritizing laser plants over ASP plants simply because the return on capital is so much greater. And also the need from our customers for these isotopes is so much more urgent. The world desperately needs more nickel 64, more gadolinium 160, ytterbium 170. Absolutely desperately need those products. And so we're kind of prioritizing those plants right now. But yeah, I would like to think we're going to start building a plant in Iceland during 2026. It's a few things we've got to do to get there, but it's early in the year and we've got plenty of runway. I think that's probably quite likely. I would also add we're looking at other regions as well. So, in the UK, I've had some discussions with a large university in the UK, which have a lot of nuclear technology already, where permits may be accelerated, a lot of expertise in this industry as well. And so, we may well look at some from the United Kingdom too. And in the United States, obviously, we've signed a deal with Fermi and LOI with Fermi to try and build some plants in the United States. We've had discussions with the DOE, and it seems like, we need to build plants in the United States. The US needs these technologies, and they need them soon. So let's get on and build them. And so, we're working through that process as well. So the plan over the next couple of years is to make ourselves more global, less reliant on just one country, and make sure we can bring what the world needs in terms of materials it needs.
I have seen Form 4 filings recently for some board members and executives. Can you confirm that those Form 4s related to sales for tax withholdings?
Yes, every time shares vest, it's a taxable event. And so most of our employees have what's called a 10b5-1 plan filed, which automatically sells shares at the ratio of their tax rate when the shares vest. So that basically ensures that the cash they need to pay their taxes is there available for them. And so most of our board members and employees have those in place to make sure that happens. So yeah.
This was submitted through X. Thank you very much, user. He asks, when are you going to ship revenue generating isotopes, not just samples?
And so I think I answered that question earlier in that for silicon-28, hoping that'll go towards the end of the first quarter. I mentioned earlier that we're just changing some ovens in the compressors. We'd ship samples. Once the compressors are back up and running again, we'll start the plant up. And a lot of the changes we made to the silicon plant were based on comments and feedback from our customers who visited the plant. And so we're keen to make those changes to make sure it's a more efficient, better plant. And so hopefully, again, for silicon-28, it should be hopefully towards the end of the first quarter. And then for ytterbium, as I mentioned earlier, we had a delay because a laser broke. That laser is now back. It's up and running. That should allow them to get the plant back going again. Then we need to install the continuous processing vessel. Then once that's done, we'll start processing commercial batches. So again, hopefully that's probably more like a Q2 event, is my guess. And carbon-14 is also likely, end of Q1, beginning of Q2. If we get the feedstock at the end of January, it's likely an April event, that kind of time frame. But again, it depends on shipping times, that kind of stuff.
Paul, you said last year many SMR companies are not going to make it. Why do you believe ASPI will be one of them that will make it? And why, in other words, what makes you different?
So my previous commentary was actually about SMR companies rather than enrichment companies. So small modular reactor companies, there are probably 70 of them in development, each with a different reactor, and they all look great on paper, but most of them haven't even advanced beyond paper yet. And so these companies are going to require billions of dollars to get their reactors to market. I think a lot of them, when you look at the levelized cost of energy from most of these SMRs, they're coming in above the cost of natural gas or other stuff. And so one has to argue about the economic need for them. It's clearly an energy need for them, but we'll have to see where energy prices trade over the next couple of years. But a lot of the mathematics around SMRs was done when uranium was trading at sort of $50 a pound rather than 80, and SWU was trading at 25 rather than 50 rather than 150. And conversion cost was trading at, call it 10 rather than 90. So your cost of HALEU's gone up at least fourfold in the last, call it 3 or 4 years. And so a lot of these really small reactors, less than 15, 25 megawatts, simply aren't economically viable for most normal situations. Sure, I'm sure you can put one in Timbuktu and it works, but your average location, it's simply not going to work economically. I guess the final thing is, there are so many in development, they're going to take a long time to get to market. I think, the first, maybe there's 70 in development, perhaps 2 of them are successful. Maybe 3, maybe 3, but I think probably only 2. And that's just because, once you're the first to market, second to market, your first of a kind reactor, let's just say costs $1 billion. Your second of a kind reactor, let's say costs 700. Your third of a kind, let's say costs 500. And your nth of a kind comes out at 400. Once you've got a company with nth of a kind reactors out there at 400, no one's coming in with a first of a kind at 1,000. So not going to happen, So I think what will drive the winners in the industry will be those that are first to market, and with those that can have a competitive levelized cost of energy, basically. And I think a lot of them are going to struggle. We've obviously partnered or working with one that we think will be successful. We know their business very well. We know the reactor very well. We think it's about the right size for a large city. And so, we think that looks like a good chance of being a winner. There's 2 of them we're talking to that we think are very interesting as well. And again, we're kind of agnostic as to who the winner is. We think we've signed LOIs or contracts with 2 winners. But at the end of the day, there will be some winners, and they will need HALEU. We're very confident there will be a HALEU demand out there in years to come. So that's my view on why I think SMRs look challenged. I'm not, I've been an investor for the last 25 years. I'm naturally quite skeptical, but I mean, this is going to take longer than people think, and it's going to, there'll be a lot of failures along the way, is my guess, and that's just the nature of these kinds of industries. Did that answer the question? Okay, Craig. And I guess that's also why will we be successful? We're not competing in the SMR industry, yep. And so they're competing in the enrichment industry. I would say the challenges are very different in the enrichment industry. Different technologies, different scientific challenges, but we haven't got as many competitors out there. There aren't many companies wanting to go into enrichment because the barriers to entry are so high in terms of the licensing, the regulatory, and the science itself is also quite challenging. So different set of challenges, but they're less competitors.
Yes, I hope that does answer your question. To our attendee who wrote that question, you can always write back if you have a follow-up. Paul, Meta announced that they will support development of TerraPower's small modular reactors. How can ASPI benefit from this partnership?
So obviously, we've already signed an agreement with TerraPower, and that will, excuse me, that will that agreement is about, it relates to us enriching uranium in South Africa, and shipping it to them in North America for their first core and their first reactor for, I think it's 10 years. Obviously, TerraPower plans to build a lot more reactors around the world. We like the design of their reactor. It's a great size. It produces clean energy cheaply, reliably. It's a great reactor. And so obviously we'd like to build more plants in more locations. So, it's great to have a customer who's got a lot of backing, a customer who is going to, who's paying for large reactors because they need energy. And so, listen, we know them well. We've got some discussions, and we'll see if we can maybe build plants elsewhere in the world or build more in South Africa. But yeah, we're very, very excited about the opportunity to try and supply this industry.
To give more context, please, to the HALEU questions, TerraPower made an announcement with Meta, but they postponed their timelines by 2 years due to a shortage of HALEU. Would love to hear Paul's current vision about timelines with regard to licensing and actually making HALEU.
Yes, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say much on that, given our S1 is filed with the SEC. So I will. All I will say is that what we have said in previous disclosures hasn't changed, and so and would expect to we're moving forwards. It's going slower than we wanted it to, but since our previous disclosures were made, which I believe was our 10Q, nothing has changed materially since then. And we're looking forward to, Rhino and his team are really looking forward to getting into Pelindaba and starting the process going.
Once QLE spins out, do you expect to apply for DOE funding support for QLE?
Again, I can't really answer that question because of the S1 on file.
Yeah, this is Craig. Can I help you?
Craig, it's Paul here. Yeah. So
excuse me.
You can't have me answer this question, I don't think. No. So yeah, with the S1 on file, we I probably can't really answer too much about that. But it's US government and DOE has made it very clear that there's a lot of incentives to encourage nuclear fuel production in the United States. And we're obviously looking at a site next to Fermi to try and build a facility. And so it would be likely that we would apply for some funding at the right appropriate time. Now, I'll probably give my comments to that. What I would say on the ASPI side, I've had a lot of discussions with the DOE as well, is becoming a recognition of how important isotopes are for many industries of the future, many technologies of the future, such as quantum computing, advanced semiconductors, quantum sensing, next generation GPSs, next generation stealth coatings. So there's a lot of discussions taking place about where isotopes are needed in the future and whether the US should have a strategic producer of those materials. If that decision went in our way, we'd expect some funding to come with it.
And this will likely be the last question, Paul, because we're running up on your hard stop at 5 p.m. Eastern. Are you working on a definitive agreement with Oklo?
I can't really comment about individual companies in this industry, but what I have said historically, I think the Oklo reactor looks really good. It's a great reactor. It's a great size. I've also said I think most reactors will fail, but I've said I like the Oklo reactor. I've also said that we've only signed term sheets with reactors that I think look interesting. I think the management team at Oklo are great. So I think I'll leave it at that. But what I would say is that we haven't been pushing the last 6 months trying to sign definitive agreements. There is so much demand for HALEU; it'll get sold to whoever needs it. We spent more of our time recently going through the permitting process, licensing process, trying to build plants, trying to sign more contracts, because we can sign 10, 20 contracts and spend our time signing those contracts. And that takes away time from building the plants, and actually building the plants is more a priority right now, given that I'm completely convinced there's the customers out there for it.
Paul, thank you very much for those great answers. For more information on ASP Isotopes, reach us at 1-800-RedChip or email us at aspi@redchip.com. There have been dozens and dozens of questions today. We do thank you. We tried to get to as many as we could. And if you want to, you can, of course, email us your question to aspi@redchip.com, and we will make sure that Paul sees your question. Please visit the information page created by RedChip for ASP Isotopes. It's aspiinfo.com. There you can view and download the investor presentation and fact sheet and sign up for news alerts on ASP. Watch Small Stocks, Big Money, RedChip's program featuring exciting small cap companies every Saturday night at 7. And finally, join RedChip's next webinar with Avalon Advanced Materials next Tuesday at 4:15 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Thanks again to our hundreds of participants today, and thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you for your interest.